Welcome back to episode 4 of So What's New in the Biscuit Tin. I'm Jess,
And I'm Sam.
and we are just two sewists chatting about life. How are you, Sam?
I'm good. I've started on my Make 9, which this year is actually sewing techniques rather than
Ooh.
patterns or fabrics, because there's definitely techniques like a welt pocket and a fly zip that I felt I needed to try. So I've put as many of those as I could on my Make 9 this year.
Nice. Do you know what you're going to focus
And
on this month?
some of them are a bit scary. I'm not sure yet. I do feel like I need to do a fly zip. It's a good one. It's a good time of year for a pair of trousers, isn't it?
Well, do you know what? So I filmed back last year. I filmed a fly zip tutorial, like a 1 minute reel one. I was so surprised. I've been terrified of them for years, and I was so surprised by how easy it was.
Wow.
That would
I'm
help. Like
hoping it's going to be, yeah, I'm hoping it's going to be like the dread I had for invisible zips and then feel good about those now. So I'll have a look at your reel on that.
Do you know what my top tip would be with fly zips? Is there's loads of tutorials which are great. Frankly, what did it for me was I just stared at a pair of home trousers and I just kept doing it. I'm doing the zip and just looking at them. And that I suddenly went, oh, I see. And then it was fine.
So, Jess, what are you up to?
I'm up to my eyes in wedding sewing, as I will be until like November. So the big breakthrough has been I have, as some of you know, I have 4 bridesmaids, and they're all friends of mine. And I'm sewing their dresses because I'm an idiot. And I've agreed to do this. I am very excited. One of my bridesmaids is going to be giving us her flat for a weekend. They're all going to come down, so I can basically. I'm going to sew 4 dresses in a weekend, roughly.
Wow.
Just as in like enough to make sure they fit, and then I can finish them in that at home. But I have decided my pattern and colours and everything. So I am making, for anyone who's interested, the Vogue I'm going to get the number right. I'm going to do it. 9328. And I'm making View E. So it's like a nice sort of, it's like a V-neck, it's princess seam, nice full skirt, floaty sleeves, but they're going to be in velvet, and they're all going to be in different colours of velvet.
Nice.
Because we're having an autumn-winter wedding, so I don't want them to be freezing either.
No.
Velvet's quite cozy. So the next job is to find the 4 colours of velvet I want, and to...
I know a good place for velvet.
Do you?
Yes. So JB Fabrics in Slough. They have some lovely velvet, and because he does all the sourcing for the fabric himself. A lot of it comes from Pakistan. When I was in before Christmas, they had some black velvet with this amazing gold embroidery on it as well.
Oh my God.
They have a lot of plain velvets, and then they had this red velvet again with like a gold embroidery pattern across it. But they're a really good selection there. So
nice. I'll
have to take you there sometime. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because most people only have about 2 shades of velvet.
No, he had a good selection.
Oh, brilliant. But yeah, that's the big challenge at the moment. And then I'm going to be diving into ties. However, as it's February as well, some of you who are following me may know it's also building up to a very, very special month of the year. And I am up to my eyes in Sew Yellow for endo planning. I'm so excited to be able to reveal all to you very, very soon. Actually, when this episode comes out, it will be incredibly soon that I'll be telling you all about it. And if you have never joined in before, please do. We're going to do an episode about it, so you can also listen to us talk about Sew Yellow for endo if you don't know what it is. But it's a challenge I set up to raise awareness for endometriosis. We raise money, we raise awareness, we sew lots of yellow things, and you get to hear experts and endo warriors talk about their experiences as well. So it's my baby. It's something I'm very proud of, and I'm very excited to.
And it's fantastic. I think it does a brilliant awareness raising. I've got my yellow fabric already.
Oh, nice. Yeah. We love organisation, as always. I do not.
You've got to watch out for the good stuff, you know.
Yes,
and I've got my first social of the year coming up as well very soon after this episode comes out. I took a break in January, but first one of the year, in-person social event. We're talking about that in another episode, aren't we, at some point?
I believe we
are.
Yes, I think it's coming up quite soon, actually.
Yeah, and we have some people come on tour. I'm very excited. I love doing them. I love choosing the fabric for the raffle prize because I get to shop without it going into my stash.
We love
Which
that.
is always,
Fabric shopping
yes,
is its own incredibly fun thing.
it
Sometimes I'd love
really
to
is.
help, but I am so excited for your next socials as well. They are brilliant. If anyone hasn't been along, you should. But we are doing a brilliant episode as well with some fabulous people from all over the country. So you can find out a bit more about socials.
Yeah, especially if you're not sure or nervous. And it's quite interesting. The more I've done on this, the more I've learned that actually for some people, they want to come, but they're nervous. So hopefully our episode will help with that. And I know that some people have come to the virtual one first, almost like a dipping the toe in, and then it's helped build their confidence to coming.
Which is
so
brilliant.
I think, Jess, yeah. Do you think we ought to crack on with today's episode?
I think we probably should. Sam, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about pattern hacking, and by that we don't mean adjusting a pattern to fit, because that's a whole separate conversation, and we're definitely going to do that. And people who watch me or Jess on YouTube and Insta will know we love a bit of pattern adjusting, but this is pattern hacking, where you're actually combining two patterns together or playing around with a pattern. So that's what today's episode is about.
So I think pattern hacking is an interesting one because sometimes it can feel like it's quite scary. It can definitely feel like something you're not necessarily meant to do, even though it's totally fine and absolutely like it's your goal and you've got to make what you want to make. But I know that there's a feeling sometimes of sort of apprehension around doing it.
I am hacking more than most people, I would say. I was just going to say, actually, I've always been a bit of a hacking type person. I would say I'm a life hack person as well. But since I've started running like the socials, virtual and in person, I've realised, as you said, how scary some people find it. And I've been thinking about why. And I've realised that there's a generational element. And I know we were talking on a previous episode about generations. And there's a lovely lady who comes to my socials called Mary. And she hears a voice in her head of her mum telling her not to be showy. And I'm working with Mary on being as showy.
So
it is, isn't it? And I've been working with Mary. Mary and I are championing being showy at the moment. And I know Mary wouldn't mind me talking about it because she spoke about it on a virtual social. And I think there's definitely people who grew up being taught to sew at school, maybe, or taught in a way where it was you have to do it the right way. And I think we did talk about it before in an episode, didn't we, where I wasn't taught by anyone, I taught myself. So to me, sort of making it up as I go along is just sort of natural to me. And Mary said to me the other week, she said, you do make my bottom clench at times, Samantha, the way you just go off at a tangent on it. And she said, but I've taught her not to be a perfectionist because no one will know. And I know we're going to talk about perfectionism another time. Yeah. But I thought it does all fit together, doesn't it? Because I literally sew a pattern the way it's meant to be sewn probably once. And after that, I'm like, can I take the collar off? Can I change the sleeve? And my brain just goes woo off to a different direction. But
that's brilliant. And I do think you're right. I think part of it is being self-taught. Sometimes you're not necessarily aware of a right or a wrong way to do something. But I love it. My boyfriend says that, my fiance now, I'm not used to that yet, says that I am allergic to instructions. In my family, I was very much raised to believe that instructions are cheating. And obviously they're not. That's insane. However, I basically don't read instructions unless I'm pattern testing. And sometimes, when I was making my Alex coat before Christmas, gorgeous pattern, love it, really excited about it. But I do get this minute where it goes, oh, and you should do this. I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to. I'm sure it'll be fine without. And I think it's that voice of, because I know you have it as well, you go, oh, it'll be fine. That a lot of people don't have, and quite understandably, because if you're like, oh no, I'm going to mess up my nice fabric, I get that. You don't want to spend money again as well.
But that's definitely the bit that has made it so much more sort of refreshing for me, is when I started buying like duvet covers from charity shops and fabric, looking at fabric and going, do you know what? I'm not going to actually wear that out, so I'm not going to be upset if I get this wrong. And I know the fancy name of toile or muslin or whatever. But interesting that you say you're allergic to instructions. I like to get to know the pattern almost before I sew it. So one of the things I love to do is, if I'm about to sew a new pattern, I will watch YouTube after YouTube video, like in the background while I'm working or something, about the pattern, if I can find them.
Yeah.
And I will like glance read the pictures in a pattern. So not the words. I'm not a big fan of the words. And someone was talking about this in one of my socials, that a lot of sewists describe themselves as visual learners. So the pictures mean so much more to a lot of people.
Way more, yeah.
And I sort of do that, and then I put it aside, and once I feel like I understand the pattern, but I like to hack patterns because I'm playing with something that I know. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. And I definitely wouldn't hack a pattern I hadn't already made, because you don't know how it's going to fit either. But I think what's quite interesting is, you know what you were saying earlier about using the fabrics that matter less to you. Yeah. I'm the opposite. If I'm using a fabric I don't really care about, I don't really care about the make either. I'm just sort of, I will half-ass it. Whereas if I use my nice fabric, a bit of my brain goes, now come on, you have to do this properly because this is your nice fabric, so get a grip. And what I do, instead of reading the instructions beforehand, like I'll have a glance over, but I sit with the actual physical pattern pieces on the floor. That's my process. I will sit there and I will look at them, and generally it's 10-15 minutes and I can go, right, I can see how that's going to fit into there and why that's that shape. But I think I'm quite I don't know, there is a word for it. I learn by doing. So I like to be able to actually pick it up and move it around.
So that's kinesthetic, yeah.
That's the one, yeah. I think but there's so many different ways of doing it and getting to many patterns.
I'm a bit like that. When I'm cutting out the pattern, I'm looking at which pieces like go together. And I think that's my Lego brain as well, looking at how do these fit together.
I love the idea of Lego brain. I think that's what we should call kinesthetic learning. It should be called Lego brain.
That's definitely better. Because like you, I have to hold the pieces and look at how they work together and like know the pattern. But there are other people, and I'm sure people listening, who read it and visualize it as they read it.
Yeah, there it. So my partner's like that. I adore him, but he is a level of he is able to process things in a way I have to pick everything up and do it. Whereas he is very good at reading something and seeing how it will happen.
Which I wonder how many sewists are actually like pick it up people rather than read it people.
Why don't we do a poll in the group and see? Yeah, that would be really interesting. Because I think, in terms of designing sewing patterns, that's something useful for brands to know.
Exactly what I was going to say, because I was thinking about that. If I was designing a pattern, I'd be really interested in what the split in demographic is to help me design a pattern that works for people. Because patterns really try to do both, don't they? They try to do for wordy and for picture people.
But also, more and more patterns have sew-alongs. So, like official ones. So Donna from Size Me Sewing, she won't mind me saying this, she does that on every pattern. There is a step-by-step video tutorial where you can see exactly what she does. So you've got that, the pictures and the instructions, and the written instructions. And I feel like she's really gone covering all bases, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, and the big four, their pictures often do not make sense. I quite like the photograph pictures, but as long as they've got good contrast between the background and the thing. And the one thing I wish they would, what I wish they would do is when they take those photos, is use a contrasting thread.
So I say this in I pattern test quite a lot.
Yeah.
Every single pattern test I do, I put the feedback in saying, can you use a bright red thread or can you use something so that I can see what's happening? Because I think one of my big issues with photographed instructions, is people putting the images in the wrong order, or putting images in a way that makes sense to them, and you go, no, but that makes me think I have to start weirdly. and using a fabric where the right and wrong side aren't obvious.
Oh, tell me about it. That drives me
so
nuts.
frustrating.
Yeah.
But also, particularly with top stitching, under stitching, like either I want you to literally highlight over what I'm doing, or like on the image after you've taken it, or use a giant contrasting thread. But it would make it so much easier.
It would.
I think a bit croaky. I've not been well for a couple of weeks, so I'm just a bit croaky today, so my voice keeps cutting out. I think as well there is a lack of understanding that sewing crosses many demographics.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there is much accessibility in terms of pattern instructions.
That's what I was about to say, because actually for me, I actually mostly choose PDF patterns now, because I can zoom in on the picture then on my phone or my laptop.
Yes.
Because I've reached the point where I have to wear reading glasses, sad face. I wear them because it's silly not to, and they're not super strong, but even for me, I need to zoom in on that picture now to get the detail properly. And I know there's lots of people with far stronger glasses needs than myself. And if I'm struggling, then I agree with you that these tiny pictures and things, they're not helpful. So I mostly get PDFs because I can just zoom in as much as I want then on my phone or my laptop.
PDFs make a big difference. But also, so I'm banging on about this at work a lot. Or I was before Christmas, and I am now as a freelancer, just still saying it constantly. I don't understand why the default for everything is black writing on a white background, considering we know that doesn't work for people who are dyslexic. It would be
it's not even
simple.
Dyslexic. There's the word's now gone from my head. There is another type of visual issue, Erlens, that gets confused with dyslexia, and it isn't dyslexia. But you're right, for Erlens people, black on white is the worst. It makes individual letters jump out. It makes it like tunnel vision. And the second you change the background to like pink, cream, different people have preferred colours.
Of course they do.
But I've worked in schools where we've said no white backgrounds, because for any of us, it's really tiring on the eye as well.
Oh, yeah, but it's such a simple change. I think that's the thing. And like also offering free versions of your instructions that are large print.
Yeah,
Things
definitely.
like that. It doesn't need to be difficult.
Well, now we've taught them how to print a pattern.
We have.
Should we get back to hacking them?
Massively. But as always, very enjoyably.
As we said, and we said that's what to expect of our pod, didn't we? That we'd go off on a weird tangent.
Question for you on pattern hacking. Is there a hack you find yourself doing a lot? Like, do you find yourself changing sleeves a lot? Or like, is there something you find you're changing more than everything else?
Yes. So definitely sleeves. I think I can't remember the last time I used the official sleeve on a pattern. But also hacking tops into dresses. That's one of my favorite ones to do. After I've made the top once, that's it. I'm like, what kind of dress could I make with this? And will it be like a super like gathered one, multiple gathered layers? Will it be more straight one? So I think that's definitely, like, I like to take a skirt part of a different dress and hack it onto the top of another dress. I love doing that. But the thing I most likely do is if it's a woven pattern, I'll go, can I hack this into a jersey?
So that's my favorite. Interesting, because I think that's something a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing, to be honest, myself included, because I think if I felt I had enough brain on the day, I'd be fine. But I so rarely sew with jersey, not because I can't, I just don't really wear much jersey.
Don't worry, come back to me in 20 years, Jess. You might have changed your mind then.
Do you know what it is? I never see jersey patterns tonight, so maybe I just need to hack some of my favourite wovens. Maybe that's.
I rarely buy jersey patterns. That's the thing. So, first of all, I made up a dress by watching various YouTubes. It was my first jersey dress I made, and then. So what I do is if I like the shape of a dress, but let's say like it's got a zip in it, my first thought is, could I do this in jersey so I wouldn't need the zip? And then you do need to size down. That's the thing to remember. So I always size down, normally one size, and then I know that because I'll be sewing it on my overlocker, if it's still too big, I can just go along the edge again and just do a whole new seam. Because that's the thing about sewing with an overlocker and with jersey is, so let's take like the Seasons of East Summer in New York dress that I now have 6 versions of, half of which are half of which are jersey. The first time I made it in jersey, I cut it, as I say, one size down, but round the waist it was still a bit loose. So all I did was just run that back through the overlocker, and of course it cuts off the previous seam and just creates a whole new seam for you. So no one ever knows that it was bigger.
Well, it makes a huge difference, and that's one thing I do love doing. Is sometimes, and again, we will talk about this a bit more in the adjustments episode, but I think sometimes you can get really hung up on doing adjustments properly, whereas sometimes I will put something on and just go, oh, well, I'm just going to whack 2 inches out of seam, it'll be all right.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, I do that.
Pretty standard, you know.
But quite interestingly, what I have realised, if you take a woven pattern and it's got darts, you can put them in jersey, and I think sometimes people are not so sure about that, but you can. So you've got choices. So I'd say either just put your stretch needle in and do a normal stitch, or you could do a lightning stitch. You know, and I bought I don't know, it was like $1.99 a meter or something, jersey fabric from Rainbow Fabrics in one of their sales, and I didn't love it, but it didn't matter because I wanted to test something out. And I think that's the thing about pattern hacking that I've realized is it's like any other creative endeavor. Not everything we do has to be wear worthy, or if you're painting, hang
you're
it
learning
on the wall worthy.
Well. Not everything. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves for everything that comes off our machine to be stunning, and you're like, well, this is also a hobby. It's a skill in the same way that, you know, when people do pottery, they bin half of what they make because it looks rubbish, and that's completely fine. But I think when it comes to clothes, there's a weird intersectionality between the sort of slow fashion, not consuming clothes, and I'm not going to sew very much. But it's like, the reality is, if you're a beginner sewist and you're not sewing a lot, you're also not going to advance as quickly as someone who is sewing every day.
Yeah, and also if you sew with an old pillowcase to try out a collar, you don't have to make the whole of the outfit to try out making a bigger collar. And I think, you know, that's if someone's thinking, because I've had some messages actually on my vlog saying, people saying I'm a bit scared to start. So I've had people on vlogs where I've talked about hacking say they're nervous to have a go. So one of the things I've said is start just with like making the collar bigger or smaller, because that's a great way to practice a hack, because all you're doing is going, I'm going to like widen the collar by 2 centimeters or shorten it by 2 centimeters, because suddenly you've created a different kind of collar. What would be your tip, Jess, for someone who's not hacked to start to dip their toe in?
I would think about a pattern, like if you're dipping your toe in and you're not sure, I would think of a pattern you can already make with your eyes shut, something you feel really confident with. And I would think about things like skirt length and sleeves. So, for example, you might say, I have a stunning mini dress that I love. I could maybe make it a maxi dress. Again, you're not doing anything different. Your seams are longer, but what you are getting used to doing is measuring your body, because the big thing with hacking is suddenly you don't have a pattern piece. So you have to think a little bit more about how you work, not how the garment works, but how your body works, how long your limbs are, what your waist measurements are, what your hip measurements are. I know that if I look at a pattern and I want to, for example, make a blouse into a skirt, that I have quite a high natural waist. So the shorten or lengthen lines or the natural waist of the pattern may not be where I am. So I think even just making a dress longer, changing a sleeve, so if it's a puff sleeve, letting it be a loose, more of a butterfly sleeve, adding sleeves, if it's a cap sleeve, make it longer. Just little adjustments where you can think about length, think about how you work, and then make notes would be my other big tip. So if you go, right, okay, I've got short legs, so if I'm, hacking a pattern and I want it to be to my ankle, I need my skirt to be this length. And if you start, you build up little notes about yourself and you get to know your own body. And I think for me, that would be my top tip for hacking. I don't know.
My tip would be, if you're hacking like a top into a dress, is baste it on the first time. You know, really lengthen your stitch, not as far as a gathering, but sort of, I go from, I don't know what the official thing is, but on mine I normally stitch at about 2.8 and I lengthen it to about 3.5 when I baste, because it's so much easier to unpick. But it's stable enough.
3.5. Or sometimes I do 3.5 and top stitching thread because it's huge and I can see it.
Yeah, and I would say it's a great one because it's better than pinning, because sometimes I pin something to try and get a sense and you just don't get the same sense as if you baste it on, put it on and look at it. And it's so easy to unpick, but it's stable enough for you to really assess the look of the skirt added to the top. And then you can easily unpick that and then bring it up, because most of the time we will baste it lower than our natural waist, and you need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and think, does this sit where I want it to sit? Tip is that, like, particularly when you're going back to sewing a jersey, the weight of the skirt will pull everything down.
Yeah. And you have to think about how you have to, with pattern hacking, not to make it sound scary, because it's not. It's lovely. It's very easy generally, unless you really want to go for it in a weird way. But you have to think a little bit about what your changes are going to do. And what I sometimes do, particularly if I'm really treading into sort of foreign waters with something, is I will sit down and I will make little bullet points, even like 3 in my notes on my phone. And I'll say, right, I'm changing from this fabric to this fabric. And I'll just sort of brainstorm almost. I'll just sit and have a think and go, right, well, jersey is going to be heavier. Do I need to move it up? Or this was originally cut on the bias. Is it going to stretch if I use a heavier fabric? Just little things like that. It doesn't have to be, I mean, at the end of the day, just use fabric you don't like as well if you're really not sure. But it doesn't have to be perfect. The more you sit and self-reflect, the easier you will find it long term, and the more you will build those skills to be able to just do it. Because Sam does it, I would say 90% more than I do it, because I am a lazy sewist, and I go, oh, I could just make it though, and I wouldn't have to think about it. But every now and then I go for it, and I really like to have a little debrief with myself afterwards.
For contrast, by the way, I never make notes ever.
Yeah, but the thing is,
it's so interesting listening to you talking about making notes. Sorry, that's not true. There is the rare time when I've got too many ideas in my head and too many patterns I want to like play with, and then I will just jot down which fabric's going with which pattern.
I'm looking right now at the notes from my last summer. I made a Barbie outfit. I
remember that, yeah.
Piece. And because that was completely drafted from scratch, I used, well, no, mostly drafted from scratch. I drafted the skirt completely myself, and then the top is the bodice of the Friday Pattern Company Saltwater. Changed a lot. And I'm looking at my notes from that now, and it's like 1 rectangle, wide hips, ? Sheared panel, swimwear elastic on top, or too stretchy. And then there is like about 15 lines of very confusing maths. What I think this shows you is the difference between the two of us. Whatever works for you, whatever makes you feel better, whatever's going to help you. If you're the kind of person who, like, my partner writes notes after every jiu-jitsu session he goes to, so he can consolidate what he's learned. So if that's you, props to you. If you're the kind of person who just goes, oh, maybe I could do that, or just, you know, I would encourage sitting and having a think. You don't have to write it down.
I definitely think, particularly when I'm driving, that's when I think a lot about what I'm going to do, actually.
Do you? That's quite interesting.
Yeah. I find that when I'm driving, my brain has because I'm driving a very familiar route when I'm driving to work, my brain has space to go off on like a little like creative wander at the same time, and I get thoughts that I wouldn't have at any other time if I try to sit and think about it. And I get sort of ideas. I was just thinking, do you think there's 2 types of sewists? There's the sewists who are very I look back at mine and your personal journey to where we've got to. We both come from very creative backgrounds, And I often talk to people who go, oh, I'm not very creative, or I'm not creative. And I do believe everybody is. We could talk about a whole hour about, I think that there's an amazing program that Grace and Perry, there you go, it's come back to me. So Grace and Perry did... Yeah, Grace and Perry did a really interesting program a good few years ago. Something like, it was about like tribes of Britain or something, or it was, I can't remember what it was called, but he went and visited lots of different groups of people around the UK, and he, like me, had this belief that humans are innately creative, and people who say they're not just don't realize how they're being creative. So he met people who did their homes up, like, you know, loved to decorate their homes. He met other people who did up their cars and put like spoilers and all those sorts of things on it. And he met a whole group of people with tattoos, and he, you know, and through talking to people, what he came to the conclusion was, which is what he kind of suspected, is that human beings innately want to express themselves. We've come into this weird place now where we think creativity is like a very sort of middle class thing where you've got to paint or do this, and actually a lot of people feel that that's not them, but actually if you look at most people, they are expressing themselves in some way, shape or form. And I think that because you and I have come through this journey through being naturally creative people, either, you know, through the environment, or, you know, if you look at yourself with your ballet and your music, and me through my painting, that perhaps gives us a creative confidence that maybe other people who've not been on a similar journey might be why they're frightened to hack, because they don't have that confidence. Well, I don't know. What do you think?
I know. I think there is something there, and I think it's quite interesting because one of my very good friends, she definitely says she's not creative. She absolutely is, and she's been learning to crochet. And she was quite interesting because she was like, "Oh, I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to get it wrong." It's like, yeah, but what happens if you get it wrong? Absolutely nothing. And I would say, like, I definitely used to think I wasn't very creative because I had a very prescriptive view. I think growing up in a very creative family, I didn't necessarily realize how creative my environment was until I wasn't in it. But also I had quite a prescriptive view of what creative was. I have one sister who's an incredible actress. I have one sister who's an incredible artist. And then I was like, that's insane. But that can be what people grow up with. They go, oh, I'm not good at music at school, I'm not good at art, so I'm not creative. And you're like, no, you're just creating in a very different way. Some people,
my stepdaughter's like that. You know, she thinks she's not creative. Yeah, exactly what you said. She loves to act and really create the character, make the character her own, and she loves to write. And I'm really trying to get her to understand that they are creative pursuits too.
I think what Sam said earlier, and actually I'm going to circle it beautifully back to pattern hacking using this, is thinking about your why. And I would also encourage you to think about this with pattern hacking, because when you are pattern hacking, it should be for the joy of doing it, or for going, you know what, I'd love this pattern if it had this. It should not be because you see everybody else pattern hacking and think you should be doing it. It is totally fine to make something and like it as it is and make 17 of it. That's also fine. But pattern hacking is a way of expressing yourself beyond the existing pattern. You don't need to do it if you don't want to, but you can if you want to. And that is, oddly, that's the message, I think, of today's podcast, actually.
I think it is,
do it. If you don't worry about it.
And if it doesn't work, stick it away and don't ever tell anyone, and it'll all be fine.
Or tell everyone. And just be like, guys, I messed this up massively, and we'll all be like, woo, so did we, you know.
You know what, the amount of people who find it so helpful when somebody says to them, do you know I messed up? I had that a long time ago. I had when I was a teacher, I used to feel a lot of pressure, as you do as a teacher, and the one thing that I always had was a messy cupboard, which I used to hide from everyone. And people used to say, oh, you're so efficient. And one day, the deputy of the school, his name was Doug, he'd been teaching a long, long time, to the point where he was seeing children of the children he taught. And he came to see me in my classroom about something, and I was in my cupboard, and he came to the cupboard door, and he looked at my cupboard, and he said, seeing your cupboard makes me feel better about myself. And I just took a moment to think, this man who I massively respected, who'd been teaching double as long as me, who knew so much, had found it freeing to see my cupboard. And I was like,
let's.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a messy cupboard, whether metaphorically or really. My desk is a tip at work. Yeah. My colleagues look at me, and one of my colleagues did turn around to me and she's like, "You're one of the most organised people I've ever met in my life. But what is your desk? What? How?" And I was like, if the desk is messy, my mind is tidy.
Yeah.
If the desk is clean, my mind is messy and I'm having an existential crisis.
Yeah, I think that sense of feeling up pressure to be spot on and what you think everybody else expects, actually, do you know what? Showing someone that, not everyone choose, but showing someone that other version, a mistake you've made or your messy cupboard or whatever, you can give them an amazing gift, I think, sometimes by letting them see that.
You can. And the other side of that is that we all get to see you. Which is the most important thing, because Instagram can, and I think it's less so now, or a little bit less, but it definitely can give this impression, this image that you have to be perfect, you have to be churning out fantastic makes. Before Christmas, I did a photo series on me pattern matching. I
loved that.
Do you know what my favourite thing about that was? Is that was actually happening, and Adam just kept turning around and going, "Can I take a photo of you? Because this is hilarious." And I was like, "Yeah, fine." And then I was like, "Right, okay, I'm gonna put it on there." And it was great because I went through the stages of, "Oh my god, this is impossible. Why am I even trying?" No, maybe it is possible. No, the project is doomed. I can't even get it out of 2 meters of fabric, let alone pattern match it. And then, hooray, I got it out of 2 meters of fabric. And Adam was like, "But it's not the same fabric." And I was like, "Shut up. It's cut out. I'm getting a coat." Like, we are. Things are perfect.
The lovely Nadia of Stitch and Style with Nadia, she put a picture on before Christmas of when she was at her social and how she sewed the sleeve onto the neck hole of the top. And I loved that she took a picture of it and held it up smiling, because I thought, that gift to so many people of saying, "Do you know what, I messed up, but it's okay." And I love that Nadia did that.
It's great because it just reminds us that we're all human and we all do a hobby and none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
And we're not robots. This is what I always say when people mess up. I go, "Great, that just reminds me that you're not a robot."
Exactly. And we're always here. Send us your sewing fails. We do love to see it. So we are into our dilemma segment. Each week we're going to talk about a dilemma or a sewing fail from you lovely people. And today's one I want to talk about, because not necessarily a massive dilemma, but I was really sad when I read it and I wanted to talk about it because I don't think this person is on their own. And somebody has written in our dilemma box to say, "I'm just terrible at sewing. I'm a relatively new sewist, but I'm really struggling with it." And I wanted to use this as today's dilemma because I don't think this lovely sewist is on her own.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to think when you first start, "Oh my God, I'm awful at this." Firstly, you're not, because you're doing it. You've given it a go. And as we've said in this episode, if it's fun, do it. If you want to do it, do it. Like, it does not have to be perfect. I don't know, Sam, when you started sewing, did you ever feel like that?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, I tried sewing patterns many times before I got to where I am now. That I still have a blouse that I started about 6 years ago that I tried, and I used a big 4 pattern, and it got too hard, and I just thought, it must be me that's terrible. And at that time, sewists on YouTube weren't a big thing, so I felt pretty alone. And I put it away and I never thought about it again. And before that, a few years before that, I tried to make a pencil skirt, and I tried to just make it up myself. And of course it didn't work out because I didn't know what to do with the zip and the top, because I'd never made one before. And so that was like what I considered a fail. So I just had these, and then about 18 months ago, I tried to just make up a summer dress myself without any idea what I was doing. And again, I put it on and went, "Meh." And I think that sometimes we take ourselves in at a point that's too hard. And what I hadn't realised was, I was often sewing bags and things. And what I hadn't realised was that I needed to start at a point where I could build my confidence, but also build my knowledge. And that's where picking a pattern from an indie company, I think, is a much better starting point, because they are written for, particularly if you choose a beginner one, they're written for you to hold your hand, like you said with the sew along, all the way through, and it does build your confidence. And I love Friday Pattern Company because of the way they write, and the fact that her logo is a seam ripper, and the fact that she's proud of that, and the way it's written, and the fact that they always film a sew along that you can watch as well. And I had nobody at the time to tell me that was a better way. So, and I'm not even sure if there was many indie pattern companies when I tried before. And I think if you don't know other sewing people, or you haven't found the sewing community on either Instagram or YouTube, you could so easily feel like that lady's put there. And I would say pick an intermediate a beginner pattern from an indie company, and sew it in a fabric you don't care about, and learn as you go along, even if it's an old pillowcase or whatever you've got in the airing cupboard, and get to know that pattern, because the confidence you'll get from doing that will build. And that's how I started again when I started. And I think, remember, like Jess was saying, that what we see on Instagram might be people's successes, or might be them 4, 5, whatever years into their journey.
I think I get a lot of, because I'm a younger sewist in the space, although aging rapidly. Because I'm a younger sewist in the space, I get a lot of people going, how did you get so good so quickly? It's like, no. I've been sewing since I was 17, on and off, but I started nearly 10 years ago. 10 years ago, pretty much, 10 years ago in the summer. I am going to add to what the fantastic advice Sam has given, is there is a lot of pressure when you start sewing to make certain things, and I personally think that is nonsense. It is very hard to find motivation to make something you don't actually want to wear or make. So I would strongly encourage having a look at your ready to wear wardrobe, thinking of the things you love wearing. Maybe there's a summer dress you really like, and trying to find a pattern like it from an indie designer, because then you're going to like the end result. That helps a lot with motivation. But also, people go, you're starting sewing, you must make a bag, you must make a shirt. And you're like, do I have to do that? No, I do not. You by all means, pick an indie pattern, try and pick something that's beginner friendly. But if you don't actually care about or like what you're making, it is not going to help your motivation. But also, I think you have to remember, most people don't feel comfortable sharing their fails, which is very, very sad. But we all have them. No one starts sewing perfectly. My mum was a costumier, and she was fantastic. Even then, when she started sewing, she freely admits she started sewing when she was quite young. She was like, it was all rubbish. It's, everybody has to start somewhere. What matters, though, is that you keep coming back to your machine, and you keep showing up, and you keep doing things you like, and you keep going, because one day you will look at yourself and go, I just self-drafted a jacket lining, or I just banded a zip, I didn't think about it, or I sewed that without any of the instructions. And trust me, that day will creep up on you, but it will happen, and you will suddenly be like, oh my goodness, I can do this.
Now, Jess, I've realised we didn't mention what biscuits we were eating.
We did not, did we? What biscuit are you, Sam?
I am eating today a classic digestive, not chocolate, nothing fancy, just a classic digestive.
That does sound pretty idyllic. I used to put cheese on classic digestives when I was younger. Cheese and butter and digestives is, can I afford a suggestion?
There is a little version of those if you buy the cheese of biscuits for cheese box, isn't there? Like the little Hovisy bread shaped one. That's like a digestive,
It's on me, but I'm awaiting the arrival of biscuits keenly. And I'm awaiting the arrival of a full pack of dark chocolate Kit Kats with my Tesco shop, which are...
I don't think that's a biscuit.
Oh, but it is to me. But thank you all so much for joining us again. We've had so much fun recording these, and we're so excited to keep bringing you more episodes. We're halfway through the season now. Wow. So if you do like it, please subscribe, like, and maybe even leave us a little review on your favourite podcast platform and help us out.
And tell your friends.
Yes, tell your friends.
Tell everyone.
And keep joining us every 2 weeks. Until next time, I've been Jess from Sold If I Sew.
And I'm Sam from Sequin Girly Creates.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, everybody.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.